Good morning. Yeah. Okay. This morning's topic is actually not an easy topic. Can you hear me? Can you all hear me now? Okay. So I said it's not an easy topic to talk about. All right. But of course, a lot of people are very interested in this idea of rebirth. Right? And of course, this topic actually not chosen by me. Arrowed to me to talk about. So I had to really think about it and sort of just see what I want to talk about lah. Okay, I think let's start off with talking about what we think rebirth is about. Now, all of us have this strange concept, I would say, of some sort of things that happens after we die. And we all think that we will go on to something else, and almost every religion has some form of it or other. Whether they call it reincarnation, they call it rebirth, they call it born in heaven, hell, whatever. Okay, everybody thinks that they were going somewhere, and this somewhere, of course, most times we think of it of almost like a physical place that you're going to. It's like you're traveling from Singapore to Malaysia to whatever part of the world. Right? Today you are here, tomorrow you are there. But I think the important thing is that maybe perhaps sometimes we have to examine also why people like to think like that. And also ask ourselves, do animals think like that? Or is it only human beings think like that? After all, at least in Buddhism, even animals also have rebirth, right? They're reborn. Okay, so do they think like that? And why is it's something that we are so obsessed with? Other than living forever, immortality, as you know from ancient times, everybody is trying to seek immortality. On the other hand, everybody hopes that if they die, they want to go somewhere and stay there forever, or in the case of Buddhism, Hinduism, where they believe in multiple lifetimes, then there's a rebirth in another plane. Okay. Now, the other thing is, of course, about rebirth is that the idea of how you are reborn also differs throughout the different religions, whether in Buddhism or in other religions. Okay, so in Buddhism, of course, there is no concept of a self or soul. So when we talk about rebirth, we try to differentiate a little bit from the idea of reincarnation, where there is this entity that goes from this life to the next life. It's like almost like a mirror image, almost like a soul that travels, right? Or disappears from here, reappears somewhere else. And it's supposed to have all the characteristics of you, right? And it's essentially a continuation of you from this life to another life, all right? And in those religions that don't talk about the word rebirth or reincarnation, the idea is still the same. You die, this entity carries on in the next existence, whether you call it a permanent or not existence, and it is again another mirror image of you, all right? I wouldn't say even mirror, because mirror has already got a little bit of a flip over. It's not that. It's identical thing that continues as if you have never changed and nothing have ever happened. Okay? So this idea obviously is something that has obsessed people for a long time. Okay? I call it an obsession. All right? Because everybody somehow or other than trying to seek immortality, also seeks some sort of continuity if they fail in their immortality. All right? So it really begs the question, why? Why? Yeah? In Buddhism, of course, rebirth is taught in a way separately from the ideas of no self, no soul. All right? You rarely hear it mentioned in the same breath. Right? It comes in different teachings, and then after that we come back to it and then try to explain why, in Buddhism, without a self or soul, we can get reborn. All right? So for other religions, it's a bit simpler because you carry on. Right? So as long as the entity exists, you can carry on. So I think this is actually very important. It's very important because this obsession obviously must have its reasons why people are obsessed with it. Okay? So let's just look very deeply into ourselves. Why are we so obsessed with this, whether we carry on or we don't carry on? It boils down to a very important thing in Buddhism, which is taught in a way separately. Okay? It's a strong concept of self and ego. That's the reason why we are so obsessed with it. We are either obsessed with immortality or we're obsessed with another life where we somehow continue in some form. So the immortality in this world, or the immortality hereafter in some form. All right? And all this actually stems back in Buddhism, we understand it as it stems back to the idea of this attachment to the self and clinging to the self. So we are fearful that we'll lose this sense of identity, this sense of control over what we have identified over our entire lifetime as the self. Right? And therefore, we project something that we want, right? Either immortality in this life or some sort of immortality in the afterlife in some form, whether we are exactly the same or not. Now, common understanding of Buddhism among most people who are just nominal Buddhists, actually a lot of times they think that when you're reborn, it's almost similar to the idea of other religions where like a soul carries on, right? Of course, in Buddhism, this is totally not the way we think of it, and not the way we understand. That's because Buddha actually has explained elsewhere that actually you do not actually have an unchanging soul. This entity, this is, as I said, I won't use the word mirror image, but an identical, image of yourself with all the characteristics, both physical, mental, etc., that goes on to the next life. All right? So now, if you were to put this out to the public and a lot of Buddhists, then you're like, now I have a little bit of a problem here now. So what is it exactly now? How can I be reborn and with no self, no soul? And so how? Am I supposed to look forward to it, not look forward to it? Is this my continuity, How is it related to me? Is it going to be exactly the same as me, not the same as me? You notice that all these questions come out because even though we may subconsciously accept the fact that we have no self, no soul in Buddhism, which I'll explain a bit further later, we still are very deeply ingrained in our heads that it's something that must go on. Something that must go on. Yeah? And because of that, you realize that actually a lot of other religions have that's why they made it simpler by saying there's something. Okay? So people find it easier to understand, easier to accept. All right? So we have that small but fundamental difference. But now if you examine very closely, as I mentioned, in Buddhism, why the Buddha still highlight that fact? That why didn't he want to make life easy for you all? Right? By saying that there's something that moves on and then, you may always go into a better life or whatever, Most religions are trying to be positive. They tell you that, okay, you definitely go on. If you're good, you'll go on to a good life and you last forever. You don't have to worry whatever you do. After that, it's always good. Okay? Right? But this is basically like what most of us like, right? People tell you what you want to hear. Okay? It doesn't mean it has to be true. And number two is that it cannot be proven anyway. It's next life. It's like fortune telling, that kind of stuff, They will tell you that, this will happen, that will happen. Then after it happens, if it doesn't happen, you just put it aside and you ignore it. You say, maybe I didn't do something right. But if it happens, you say, wow, the fellow very clever, This fellow tell me like that. And it happened. But in this case, it's next life. Nobody's going to verify for you. Right? Happen, don't happen, nobody's going to know. All right? But in the Buddhist context, Buddhism doesn't want to tell you that, or Hinduism doesn't want to tell you that. They tell you that, okay, it depends on what you do and everything. There will be some effect on your subsequent lives. All right? But in, say, for example, Hinduism, there's still a certain idea of self, or at least some sort of universal self sometimes. But in Buddhism, there isn't. All right? So that we have a situation where we talk about you still have to do things correctly and create the causes and conditions for your happiness or your better life subsequently, right? So even though you as an identical entity as you are now, it's not going to continue in that form, but whatever continues on will have the potential to be affected by what you do now. Okay, I don't know whether you all understand what I'm trying to say. Okay? This is very tricky, right? It's a very, very tricky place. Now, maybe we have to examine very closely again the idea of no self and how this can happen. Yeah? Now, first of all, why did the Buddha tell us that there is no self? Right? Of course, on the surface, we all say, okay, it's obvious, like, I'm here, you're there, and all that type of things. This is really a matter of convenience, it's a matter of setting a reference point so that we can interact in a meaningful way, right? But we all know the reality of, for example, the physical body. Much as we claim it for ourselves, right? If you look much deeper from a scientific standpoint, actually we are all no different, made of the exact same thing as the rest of the universe, right? Made of those atoms, right? And whatever subatomic particles, and following the law of physics that creates this chemicals and all these things that pull together and into biological systems which follow biological laws, okay? And therefore you have this organism that differs in small ways, but are in many ways quite similar, right? And if you extrapolate this even to animals and other life forms, same lah. It's only the physical manifestation different, all right? So the physical manifestation of so-called self is created by whatever the causes and conditions that made you, right? And we all know what determines your physical appearance, your physical makeup, your biological makeup, right? Maybe a long time ago people didn't know, but somehow the Buddha had sort of an inkling on it, right? So he did mention other the physical forces, biological laws, and basically biological laws, not only just biological systems, but also genetics. You inherit what your parents pass to you. And what they pass to you is really, really part and parcel of the idea of causes and conditions, right? So they pass to you the certain genetic traits and all that. But not all genetic traits, the genetic traits will manifest, we all know. Environmental factors will affect it, and some will come to light, and some won't come to light, all right? Again, we used to talk about it in very simplistic terms from a medical standpoint. Well, you have just genetic predisposition, you get this. Or you say that, okay, you smoke cigarettes a lot, you definitely get cancer, all right? But then all of us have many instances where we can say, hey, where? The fellow smoked until he's 90 years old, no cancer, right? So you're saying that, so maybe not true. You see, but that's a simplistic understanding in the same way as we understand karma and rebirth, very same way, right? The fellow may smoke for 90 years and he didn't get cancer because his genetics did not have that risk in him, or for some reason the genetics is resistant, right? That it cannot interact with the environment in such a way that some abnormal cells can come up and then take over as a cancer, right? So similarly, a lot of things that we do and all that with our physical makeup can or cannot solely determine what will happen to us in the future, right? Similarly, our mental makeup also changes with times, and the mental makeup, as we all know, if I were to give you a head injury, your mental makeup might change. I give you a stroke, tomorrow your personality might change, all right? So all this tells you the physical interact with the mental, right? And all these things on the gross level is a cause. I mean, it's supported by other things behind it, which are chemicals, which are supported by things behind it, which are atomic, etc., etc. Okay, so you can see all these systems are all interacting with each other, and none of them have any great certainty other than some links of causes and conditions that interact with each other to create what we see and what happens to us. All right? Keeping that in mind, this is a very modern perspective, of course. You realize that because of that understanding, you realize that what we perceive to be ourselves as a concrete entity or with very specific problems or whatever, to be very rigid as something unchanging is obviously not true. There's so many moving parts at different levels, from the gross level all the way down to the very subatomic level. It varies, right? It varies to causes and conditions. Like you walk out into the sun, okay, two people, okay, not being racist here. You one dark skin, one light skin. Two of us walk out in the sun, the dark skin fella, okay, no difference, my skin doesn't get really much darker. The light skin person, my skin also doesn't get so fast dark, right? But they are exposed to the same cosmic rays, the UV rays. One may get skin cancer, the other one won't get, right? And why is this so? It's because of genetic makeup, right? Genetic makeup and the chemical makeup that comes from the genetic makeup that protects one and disadvantages the other. Okay? So all these things tells you first and foremost that what you yourself think is so unique about you is nothing more than all these causes and conditions that have come together that interact to create each of us who in a sort of a unique, yet not so unique way. All right? Now, why are we always thinking of ourselves as unique? It's because we have to interact with each other. When we interact with each other, we must put a reference point. Right? Like, for example, I cannot tell you a certain number without telling you there's a 0 point. There's no meaning. Right? As compared to 0, there's no meaning to the number. So there must be a reference point. Everything must be measured from a reference point. So as long as there's a little bit of variation from the reference point, we can differentiate one being from another being. But it doesn't mean that they are so unique in that sense. You can just differentiate them from a convenience point of view. We classify them into categories of this race, that race, right? This genetic makeup, that genetic makeup, right? But essentially, if you go down to the core of it all, and you realize that because we are made of physical and mental components, right? There's no reality of this ever unchanging entity called the soul, right? Therefore, the Buddha himself was really very clever. I don't know how he figured this out, that there is no self, no soul, right? But he never said that there was no conventional sort of thing that, right? There's no conventional thing called the Buddha or no Buddha, right? Therefore, a lot of the thing about no Buddha and or the Buddha or kill the Buddha or whatever, it's all a figure of speech, but it reflects this idea of, that there's actually, all these things are just due to causes and conditions, right? When the Buddha was alive, he had a physical body, right? He was able to talk, he was able to think, he has a mental system that is supported by physical body until he passed away, right? He is totally conditioned. That's why he got ill and he died, right? So when people try to bring a lot of very fantastic ideas about Buddha and all that, I'm not even sure whether that's what really he wanted or meant, when he taught, right? Because his teaching seems to point the other direction, right? A very logical, analytical way that we are a mix of physical conditions and mental conditions that create each seemingly unique person. And with these causes and conditions that create physical, that supports mental, and therefore we have a being. Okay? Now, so what happens to this being when he is born, he's first born? In Buddhism also it says, right, for a being to be born, there must be physical, sort of biological reasons for it. You must have ovum, you must have sperm, you must have the mother who is able to have the fertilized egg, the zygote as we call it, and then from there the conditions that for it to develop. All right? And once these two has merged, consciousness will take root. That means it supports a mental process. Okay? Of course, sometimes we think of it, consciousness fly from somewhere, go inside. All right? It seems to suggest that. But again, if you look further into the teachings, they don't really say it like that. All right? Right? They say that the consciousness will take root. Right? But we always like to think of when they say take root means something flies in and goes into the thing from somewhere. Okay? Because to say that will contradict with the overall teaching that there is no self. Okay? So no, it's just that the two biological factors come together in an environment that supports it. Right? Things like consciousness can arise. And as it develops, sense organs will arise. When sense organs arise, sense faculties arise. Okay? The mental faculties that come about from the sense organs will arise. And then as they develop, you get a baby, and then you get a human being or animal or whatever. Yeah? And then it moves on from there. That's beginning end. Now all this will keep going, right? And keep renewing as you move along. You know that as a baby, you have this physical form, you have this physical capability, but as you grow up to adult, you develop new things. Your cells mature, your organs mature, and also age, right? Similarly, because of experiences through your sense organs, you also change your physical constitution. Now, this is something, again, that people used to think, again, we're very rigid, we're born with a brain, and that's it, you're done, Everybody accepts that you can learn something, so everybody thinks it's like a computer, you write to your hard disk, right? And your hard disk stays the same size and the same speed, okay? But I think now, in medical science itself, it has become very clear to us, right? Your CPU gets constantly upgraded over the years as you stimulate it more, right? And similarly, your storage space seems to be like, at least even if it's not growing, it is definitely being more and more utilized more efficiently. Maybe the encoding is better, so everything gets, encoded into smaller bits of information more efficiently. You can store more in the same area in the brain or the same volume of brain, right? Previously, you think that if you damage your brain, end of story. Nothing can be done, right? But now they also find that, it depends on your age and your reparative process, how you can repair yourself. Over a period of time, actually, quite a lot of the brain can be slowly repaired, but just very slow, right? It's the nature of neural tissue. It takes a long, long, long time, but it happens. Because why? We learned that your brain keeps changing in configuration. As I said, it's like a computer, but this is a self-upgrading computer. Depending on the stimulation in the environment, right, your brain has this thing called plasticity. So it can grow new neurons, can grow new connections, And there's also some evidence that people who use certain parts of the brain more have a brain that's hypertrophic. In other words, it becomes bigger in those areas. So that's another evidence that the causes and conditions that are beyond just the physical body that you were born with, right, that can affect what you have, right? Another indirect evidence that you are not some rigid creature, okay? So as you grow up and you evolve as your life goes on and you evolve, you will find that most of us don't question this fact, but if I ask, is that you as a baby? Yeah. Is that you as a teenager? Yeah. Is that you as an adult? Yeah. Is that you as an old person? Yeah. When you die, is that you? Yeah. Okay? But at the same time, you ask yourself, but there's a baby, it's so small only can cry, can basically eat, sleep, and poop. That's all. Okay? And now your old age also, sometimes you reach the age of dementia, everything also eat, sleep, and poop lah. So, right? So you see, you can see the continuity, right? Right? So is that the same person? Technically, yes. Technically, no. Right? We all know, right? Again, another very good proof there is no concrete entity that we always picture in our mind. That when you die, does it mean that when you die as a baby, your soul like baby size? When you die as an adult, it's old people size. You die as a demented adult, you're a demented adult in heaven. Oh, that's not very fun, right? But it seems that when we talk about it, we always think very simplistically, right? When we think idealistically also that when I die in my perfect state, so therefore I'm born in that perfect state. Some religions refuse to transplant organs because they say if I don't have this organ when I die, when I go to heaven, I don't have the organ also, right? So you can see all this craziness that we create for ourselves, right? By not understanding that this is all a matter of causes and conditions. Okay, now let's take the end of life, going towards the end of life. So what is this about? As you approach your death, okay, which can occur anytime, don't need to say you have to be old to die, right? We see people die at all different ages. Okay, what will happen then? It's essentially when you have something that interrupts your physical or biological processes, right? And from there, you actually lose the faculty to manifest the mental factors. Right? When that happens, you either become vegetative or whatever and die sometimes. Okay? So after you die, what exactly happens? So is there something that will carry on? Like I mentioned to you just now, if I ask all of you here, if I said, okay, if you think that you die and you go to heaven, just say, most of us have this idea that it's me in this present state appearing somewhere else. Correct? Right? Nobody would think that if I die demented and in a bed curled up like a prawn, totally with bed sores and everything, I'm going to die and reappear there like that, right? But why not? Where was the last time that something? Why is it that when you reappear there, you must appear in adult state, not kiddie state, not totally decrepit state? Why not? Right? You see, this is what we have to understand. We create ourselves, all these images. There's no reality to it at all, right? That's why the Buddha doesn't want all this nonsense. He's actually very clever, He says, what is rubbish, right? This is all nonsense, right? So when you are born when you're so-called reborn, or there's rebirth, are we talking about this physical idea of rebirth of a self, a soul, an image, whatever you want to think about? Obviously not, right? We are talking about rebirth, rebirth of processes, right? Right? Processes that come together again as a result of the last causes and conditions that were in existence, right? As you know, the physical body is also, in a way, it determines both ways, right? A positive mental state can create a lot of physical changes that are positive. Maybe also indirectly causes more healthy behavior patterns that results in a positive outcome in your health, right? Not everything, you can't will a cancer away, okay? But you can take actions if you are mentally aware to do things that prevent you from increasing your risk to cancer, okay? So it tells you, right, there are limitations, both ways there are limitations, okay? So in Buddhism, always we describe being reborn in the next life as like lighting one candle, having a candle lit. When the candle runs out, right, you transfer the light to another, and the other candle just starts off again. It is the same yet not the same. Can you say the light has gone from one candle and traveled and walked across to the other candle? Not really, because the causes of the next light is a new candle, which is a new body. The fire, is it the same fire? Yes, there is a small correlation. The fire has been moved in the sense that fire was used to light the other candle, but that's all there is to it. In other words, it's just a cause and condition, but it's got nothing to do. They're not identical at all, because the new flame is totally dependent on the new candle and the causes then. Maybe there's a wind, there's no oxygen, there's oxygen, whatever, right? So you can see all these things are really, the connections are very, very thin. They're very thin. But you can't say there's no conditions that are related. Because if the first candle didn't have a light enough to light the next candle, then there will be no next candle light, right? It will be just a physical candle but no light, right? So all these things must come together correctly, right? So you can say that somebody who is enlightened may have not created the causes such that, I mean, loosely said, the causes of enlightenment, right? That therefore the mental processes will be extinguished, right? So that's why the word nirvana, you see? So even then, when he has a physical body, the mental processes do not exist in the way that we know it, that's all, right? I won't go there as to say what it is exactly, because I can't tell you what it is. I'm not enlightened, right? But I can explain to you in this way. So therefore, when we look at rebirth in Buddhism, it is really not about the movement of one entity to another entity, the traveling of this particular thing, whether mental or physical, to the other, but it's actually this link of cause and effect that crosses the point of death, right? But actually, if you look at it and you go backwards and you analyze, it crosses many points of your life anyway. That's the way it goes, right? From the time you were a baby, all the way to your age and die, it's always this continuous link of mental and physical processes that are causing each other to go on. All right? It's only difference that when you die, the physical one seems to have gone, and the mental one no longer supported. So when a new life appears, right, if there are similarities to the old life, it would mean that it will link very loosely to the causes and effect of that train of life, right? But the new life is essentially quite different. Only some characteristics get passed down. And therefore, when we talk about karma and all that, only certain things get passed down. Not everything get passed down, right? And that's still in line with Buddhist teachings, right? You know that some of the karmic effects of actions will not manifest because they are just too minor. Others which have very strong impact on your mental processes might manifest, right? Whether the next life, the following life, or whatever. But for it to manifest, it also has to have other causes and conditions that help it to manifest. Say, for example, if you have, say, you created a very bad karma, or bad action. I would say bad karma, because that's a very wrong way to use the word also, all right? So you created a bad action, and you say that, okay, this guy is likely to face this problem. Okay, this problem can only occur if he puts himself in a situation where the effects can manifest. All right? So a lot of it can still be modified. And therefore, in Buddhism, the idea of rebirth, karma, It's not fatalistic. It doesn't mean that you do this, it has to happen. No, it doesn't always have to happen. And that's the reason behind why we try to create good actions. Because it can mitigate a lot of things that you do or have done that you may or may not be aware of. You have totally no idea you have done it, right? Because you've gone through your life, so many thousands and millions of things has happened. You don't know sometimes, right? Or you cannot remember. You think it's small, but you could have triggered something. And if you have created a lot of causes and conditions for positive outcomes to occur, there's less and less chance for the negative outcome to take root, or even if it takes root, it will be modified to the point that it's actually lessened in intensity. That's the reason for it, all right? Although a lot of times when we talk about creating good karma, we think about, I go temple, donate, I'll do this, do that, so that I can be rich, I can be this and that. That's a very simplistic thing. If I do bad karma, I'll be punished, right? This is like teaching children, right? Carrot or stick approach of life, right? But in Buddhism, actually, the understanding is actually a lot further than that, and which I'd like to share with you. You see, so it's not like that, right? When you talk about creating good actions and all that, it's actually just to modify the situation for yourself so that you have less chance of letting whatever negative actions that was created to manifest. That's your good karma controlling your bad karma, all right? And if you don't create any more bad things to cause bad reactions later, then it just won't occur. But can bad things happen to good people? Yes, of course. You must not forget, there are a lot of things in the world not determined by karma. Many, many things are not determined by karma, all right? See, of course, a lot of times we see an accident, we say, maybe people are so bad, poor thing, bad karma, right? Gonna strike by lightning, bad karma. But, if you hold this there in the house, how to get struck by lightning? Cannot get struck by lightning, right? So it's the causes and conditions again. And there are physical laws. If there's no thunderstorm, that's not going to happen. If you live in a place that you hardly ever see a thunderstorm, how is it going to ever strike you with lightning? Never ever, right? But it doesn't mean you cannot die from other things. So you have to see all these things are all so many moving parts, So we should never ever also judge people from that point of view. There's just too many moving parts, right? Karma is just but one aspect that creates what you experience, your life, right? As I mentioned to you just now, right, there are biological things, there are physical laws, there are other laws that interact, or other things that interact in a complex manner that creates our environment and our experiences. All this contributes to what you go through, right? But the only thing that you can control is the things that you do. The rest you cannot control. How are you going to control the laws of nature? Nothing you can do about it, right? How are you going to control the subatomic particles? Through science, that's it, right? But mentally, you can't do it on the individual level. You see? Biological laws, how you control? Genetics, right? You play with the genes, right? And like for example, that the Chinese scientists go and clone, or he did some gene intervention, and then the kid was resistant to HIV, right? I still don't understand why he's being jailed for it. Okay, he maybe should have been disciplined in the sense that you need to have a bit more regulatory approval or whatever oversight, but I don't think in itself is a bad thing. Right? After all, genetics one. You try so hard, millions of dollars to try to treat one disease, right? That may affect only a small group of people, and now you can prevent it at the source of it, and you say this guy is not doing the right thing, right? Maybe he didn't go through the due process, as we know it, to prevent abuse. But again, the idea of abuse is not really what he has done, right? It's whether the people who use the technology can abuse it for good and for bad, right? So it's a bit strange. But again, this comes from a lot of times from a very rigid idea of reality and also a rigid idea of morality, right? Because they think that it's a created being, or we should not interfere with nature and all this sort of thing. But nature is interfering with us all the time. The fact that we are living, we interfere with nature. There's no way of running from that, okay? Now, the second part of the second thing on the talk is about renewal. Right? So what is this about renewal? Now, I mentioned to you just now about rebirth already, but you can see at every point in our life, we are changing, we are evolving, right? Part of it we decide, the other part of it is a response to the environment. Because as the environment changes, we change. Many years ago, there was no handphone, right? So we don't know how to use a handphone. There's no such thing as personal messaging, whatever happening. But today, there's a handphone. So we do all these things. So, and we adapt our lives around it, right? And for better, for worse, of course, for better means we easy to communicate very fast. For worse is that we don't even talk to each other. We only look at the phone, right? So this is how we actually keep evolving and keep so-called renewing ourselves in different ways in response to the environment, right? And in another 10 years' time, maybe something else comes up. Nobody wants to look at their phone anymore, right? Then we start renewing. So renewal is not exactly something that we should take in a positive or negative sense. Again, there's nothing positive, negative about it. It is just a process that goes on. And it is actually a mark of impermanence. All right? And it's also a very good indicator that how things change continuously. Very often when we use the word renewal, we have a positive idea of renewal, right? But it's nothing more than just change, right? As you grow old and die, that's also renewal. When you rot, your body rots and go back to the soil, it's renewal of the fertilizer, okay? So it's renewal. So again, don't hold too strongly to your ideas of words, the meaning of words, but look at it beyond. Sometimes we use it, we are all told that this word is always very positive, renewable energy, right? So everybody's so excited. But have you looked at the amount of effort and how much energy that it goes into creating renewable energy? I'm not so sure, honestly, right? Yes, we need to cut down on how we waste things, right? But I'm not sure by trying to reclaim those things, we are actually being more efficient. Not always the case, all right? So that's always been a little bit of a controversy, right? One very simple one which I always laugh about, it's not that I don't support this thing. Because in principle, I agree that we should do something, but I'm not sure what we are doing is correct anyway, right? Like, for example, electric cars. We all say, oh, decrease emission, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, but your electricity has to come from somewhere, right? What do you use to get electricity for your cars? Fossil fuels still, right? Unless you're willing to go nuclear, which is the cleanest, which I'm very, very supportive of. I think nuclear energy is really the way to go. But there's a whole group of people who are so paranoid, right? No, cannot. Got nuclear, wait, you got nuclear leakage and blah, blah, blah. But actually, you look at the track record, actually, it's not too bad, But it is really the cleanest, right? So you can see human beings are very complicated and also very confused, right? And depending on how hard the people, what I call the noisy minority lobbies, we tend to go with them, right? So what I would encourage before I end this talk is that I would encourage you all to just be an independent thinker, ask questions. Do not fear the fact that you may be out of line sometimes, all right? Because only if you can think out that you can actually learn new things, right? And but I'm not saying that you disrupt in a bad way, right? But it can also always be done keeping in mind there are consequences, there are conditions that you create, and be a bit cognizant of the fact that not just by disrupting doesn't mean that you are always creating good outcomes, right? So keep that in mind as you do your gentle questioning and disruption, right? Only with that, I think, right, it's a real renewal that we can actually progress with. Okay? I think we have 10 minutes, so maybe we can take some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tan, for sharing insightful talk. Let's say sadhu 3 times. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So we have a bit of a Q&A.